overarching theme has been diversity. And I have been banging on about increasing biodiversity in our gardens for 30 years. And I almost got to a stage where I thought, stuff it. It's not worth it. No one is listening. No one gets it. No one cares. We are all becoming so far removed from nature in our city spaces, not in Denmark, of course, that children are now growing up with no connection to nature because they don't experience it. So even though horticulture is very different from agriculture in some ways, it is through our gardens that we learn how to observe. The best people at this are our First Nations people. I've been very privileged to be able to work up in the Kimberley for 15 years, and it was actually the group of women that I went out with that taught me how to observe. I thought I knew that. I certainly didn't. So we need to actually sit and observe to understand the diversity of the system that is in there. It's like a big pie chart. If you take one bit out, then there's no connection. And then you start getting systems breaking down. So it's a very, very complex thing. And I, as a species, as Homo sapiens, we are becoming weaker as a species because clearly we've overpopulated and we are consuming all the resources. And there will be links that will start to be broken. So we have to care for this planet more urgently than we have ever done before. But we must understand that we are all connected to everything else that's on this planet. We can't just wipe out one section and go, it'll be okay because I'll turn the air conditioner up, be fine. And what's happening in our cities is that with climate change and the taking away of tree canopies and the green spaces, our cities are getting really hot. If you look at an infrared vision of the city of Perth from 30 years ago, you should see the heat factor there now. So we must be very, very proactive in saving biodiversity. And the soil is a bit like the skin on our body. We don't really look at it unless you're my age. And you go, oh, there's a bloody great crevice there. That's coming in. But it contains everything that we need. If we didn't have the skin on our bodies, we're going to be really ugly and dragging our liver and kidneys behind us. Mine have probably shriveled up to nothing anyway, so they'd be quite light. But it's really important that we look at how we farm, how we garden from the soil up. And as a gardener, the stuff that was available to the home gardener was pretty terrible. The fertilisers were high release nitrogen, high phosphorus. We had all that stuff leaching out into all the waterways. And as a farmer, you have to understand that you are part of a very complex system. And we have to understand now that everything that we do on our property affects everywhere else. So we can no longer do the whole, oh, what I do on my farm is fine, it's okay. It will affect everything else, including your neighbour's property. As a gardener, we have to understand that everything that comes into your garden will somehow balance itself out. I haven't used pesticides, herbicides or fungicides for 20 years in my garden, 20 years. When I get an influx of something, the plant is weak. So I use my fingers and my boots effectively, very effectively, and I use other methods of control. And certainly prevention is way better than cure. So if I have scale or aphids or whatever, I will sit in my garden and if it has to take a whole bottle of wine, it has to. Sometimes the conditions are so bad it takes 2. And then I start seeing all sorts of creatures in the garden. So I sit and observe and look at what eats what. And basically it's a slaughterhouse in your garden, because there is something that is going to eat something else and really relish in it. There was, I listened to the science program, and they were talking about when whaling was in, full swing. And they thought that with all the whales that were dying in the world that were being hunted, that the krill population would explode because they weren't being eaten in such large numbers. And what they found was the krill population went way downhill. And the reason is the krill needed the poo of the whale to actually sustain them and build up their numbers. One of the biggest corn producers is in a place called Bidjidanga in the Kimberley, and they had a major problem with caterpillars, the budworms. So the caterpillars eating all the corn cobs. They sprayed and sprayed and sprayed and sprayed, and the problem just got worse. And so they thought, we'll try something different. They brought in a whole pile of very small parasitic wasps. They cut their spraying down by 2/3 because the parasitic wasps took care of the caterpillars. And then they looked at what they put on the soil, because our soils are very leaching. We do have nutrient-poor soils, but our plants have evolved to actually take the very little that is there in conjunction with the microbes that are there to extract all those nutrients. So we now know that that goes on. So we have to think about things not in terms of an individual crop or an individual, whether we've got cattle or sheep or pigs or llamas. We need to understand that they're all connected somehow to everything else. And without diversity, we are doomed. Without insects, we are doomed. So don't kill insects. They play a vital role. And some nutritionists around the world reckon we'll be eating insect bars. That's what we're going to be left with. And I have tried them, and they're completely tasteless. You actually need a gin and tonic to wash them down. That a little bit dry and gritty on the back of the throat. But the other thing, I got to know Stephen Frost and his beautiful family, 15 years ago? Long time ago. And as a gardener, I was looking at trying to get more sustainable practices and using my enormous talent to vent on air, to try and change people's practices to a more sustainable thing. So I met Stephen, went down, had a look at the farm, and I was really interested in, because I've always grown my own food. So for me, to have the privilege to have the space to grow your own food, I want to know what's in my food. And so does the international community. They will dictate what we're going to grow, I reckon. And we have to be growing things a lot smarter than we are now. So we grew up in very isolated places. So we always had to grow our own food. If you didn't grow it, you didn't eat it. So, or you traded. So I've grown up with the taste and flavour of food that's been grown organically. And when I buy fruit and veggies from supermarkets, I'm always disappointed. Don't bother. Goes in the compost. So nutrient density, and that's the thing. If you come from a regime where you've grown everything from your paddock to the plate, it is flavoursome. It is full of minerals. It is good for your body. And grapes, of course, are in that league. There's lots of organic grape growers now. So nutrient density has always interested me. And then when I met Stephen, who talked about his fertiliser, I thought that makes sense, because we traditionally, as gardeners, growing our own food, we put in poo, we'd put in clay, we'd put in the charcoal, we'd put in, dead cats, dead sheep, whatever died, you'd stick it in a hole because we knew it was good for what you were growing on top of. And then I looked at how many minerals, and then I looked at all the data that Stephen had on how it was actually feeding the soil. And I thought, this is what we need. We need this in horticulture. We desperately need it in agriculture. But the home gardener didn't really have much of a choice. So I wanted to preach to them that the soil is so important. The food that you are eating from supermarkets does not have the minerals and the nutrients in it that our children need to develop and grow into healthy adults. If you look now at how many allergies there are in children, it is frightening. So the one commonality with all of this is what we eat. So perhaps we're not getting the minerals and the nutrients into our children at a very early developmental stage. And I have used, from the time I used Growth Safe, all those years ago, I will not use anything else. I do consulting for landscaping jobs. I do a lot of private landscaping. I go into their shed and I throw out everything that they've got and I say, this is what you need now. So I truly believe in the benefits, and it's not fast. Like, you're not going to see, like with the lawn porn people that go out and spray high nitrogenous release fertilizer on their lawn and, boo, it's green in 2 days' time. You will not got that, and that is not sustainable. And it's also not good for plants. It weakens them, just like it weakens us. So we need to think about things in terms of that holistic system. It's about caring for our land, for our future generations. Is there anyone here from the city, from Perth? There's a couple of people. Down in Denmark, they seem to have a really good balance of recognising that green space with hard space, you must have a balance. Because once we start losing biodiversity, in the city, we have certain insects now which are completely extinct in the city. We have birds that no longer, so birds of prey, particularly owls. We've lost a lot of our birds of prey because of people using rat poison and bait. I didn't even know I had owls. So I was sitting out the back doing an overnights program, and I was thirsty. So I was just sitting there observing. Please observe your gardens at night. It is magic. And you can do it nude as well if you want, depending on the mosquito count. And I heard 2 boo-book owls. I had no idea I had owls before. And I've got a dirty, great, big, massive lemon-scented gum tree in my yard that was there when I bought the block, one of the reasons why I bought it, which the neighbours just love, especially the ones with the pool that's directly underneath it. They beg me every year, please don't cut your tree down, we so love it. And the boo-book owls nest in there every year. And it's just beautiful. But it comes down to observation. You don't have to go out naked at 1:30 a.m. But, even if it's around 10 o'clock. The other thing I saw in summer, it can be nippy down here, can't it? The other thing that I observed was I had spider mite in a hedge. And that makes all the leaves all silvery and wacko. But we were having a little celebration at home, and I had solar lights put up over the top of the hedge. And then within about 6 weeks, I noticed all the spider mite had gone. Now, I don't spray. And then when I looked in the hedge, it was absolutely, completely covered with spider webs. All the spiders had eaten the spider mite. So it's things that just observation teaches you these things. And, you know, Indigenous people are so good at that. They don't just observe what's there. They observe what's around it, the whole system that is around it. And we must learn to do that. And it's pleasurable. You know, being in nature, we are attuned to green. So when we see green, it has a calming effect on us. For me, it's green and red. Very calming effect. So it's not that long. You know, when as a species, when we crawled out of the cave, we weren't that special from any other species of man that evolved. But we are on a trajectory now where we're at a pivotal point. We are going to have to change our practices. We're going to have to respect nature. We're going to have to get our children to experience nature. We need to plant more trees. We need to understand how systems work. We need to get our children to observe, to look, to understand that we're all integrated together. And as a planet, we all have to do our bit. You know, we think in Australia we're pretty smart and we've got things pretty well covered, but I think we're way behind the 8 ball. And certainly in terms of emerging agriculture and who we're going to sell our produce to, we've been given the wake-up call, have we not? So we really need to consider this for the future generations. And we've had the most wonderful speakers today that, you know, please go up to them and get more information. Do not come up to me and ask me a lemon tree question because I will not answer it. But when you are buying food for your children, think about what's in that food. Think about the nutrients and the minerals that may not be there. And I have noticed a huge difference in my garden since I switched across to minerals. So the Grow Safe minerals, their mineralised-based fertiliser and their microbes. Within, I reckon, it took about probably 4 to 6 months, there was a complete change in the growth of my plants. And I have worms aplenty, not me personally, but I have, I could do. I probably do. I don't mind. Allow your children to get dirty. Allow them to have germs. Germs are very important. We are made up of germs. Our skin is heaving with filth. It's wonderful. Let your children have access to all that stuff. They will be much healthier children and adults in the background. Please, when you go to your garden, sit. I want you all to do this at some point in time in the next week. I want you to sit, go out around about 4:30 is legitimate time, 4 o'clock. Just sit. And you go in your clothes because it gets chilly down here, and where I'm staying in Albany, there's about 80 million mosquitoes. If you've got mosquitoes, have bats. Fantastic. Bats are great. Bats love eating mosquitoes. But I want you to sit and observe and just look what comes where, who comes with it, and what they do, how they interact. And I want you all to interact today. Have a look at the person next to you and think, what are you doing? I'll do it too. We'll all do it together, and then we'll have a better planet. Thank you very much.